Now, let's just tick off some of the attacks on Franklin D. Roosevelt. Remember, Marshal Stalin told President Roosevelt's son in 1946, the Churchill gang poisoned your father. This is a book by Elliot Roosevelt, and he says, here's what Roosevelt was going to do after the war. Implement the Economic Bill of Rights. End the colonial empires by refusing to restore them. Keep the British out of Greece and such places. The world would be run as a US-Russian condominium. That may be where we're headed today. I hope that would be much better than other alternatives. The British cut out. No Cold War. US keeps prosperity by rebuilding the Russian-Soviet economy and by high technology exports to the ex-colonies. He's aiming at 100 million total US jobs, and he's got indictments ready to go against the pro-Nazi elements of the US ruling elite, especially Allen Dulles. Now, it's not one attempt, it's not two, it's 5 against Roosevelt. There's an assassination attempt, 3 coups, and a successful poisoning. Let's just talk about it. Here's the assassination attempt. This is President-elect Roosevelt in Miami. Gunman comes, Italian anarchist, kills the mayor of Chicago. Roosevelt escapes. Then the one you know, the Smedley-Butler Dickstein Committee. Okay, that's Morgan. It's not the business coup, it's the Morgan coup. I have to point out, we're accustomed today to think of the Miami Cubans as the foot soldiers for the CIA in so many operations. Watergate, Iran-Contra, Bear Pigs. In those days, it was anti-communist Russians, white Russians, anti-Soviet Russians. And here's one of them. Major General Van Horn Mosley. He was on Pershing's staff in World War I. His plan was seize the White House with a group of white Russians in 37, 38. This is somebody who rants about the Jewish communist conspiracy. He's a Nazi sympathizer. Fascism and Nazism are good for the United States because the finest types of Americanism can breed under their protection and stop the communists. So he's with the German-American Bund, America First, the Gentile League, and he's for white supremacy. And then here's the other coup. This is an attempt. This is Anastasy von Siatsky, a Russian Nazi who happens to marry a very rich heiress. This is the plan to seize the White House with a group of white Russians in 41 to 42. The Russian fascist organization, based in Manchuria under Japanese occupation. It's complicated, isn't it? This guy, well, this is where the Dodd family comes out. Thomas Dodd, right, the father of the senator that you've seen, became famous in prosecuting that case. Now, Henry Wallace, Oliver Stone and Klutznick write about Henry Wallace. They tell about Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace is a very positive figure. This is the New Deal, right? The century of the common man, pro-Soviet, anti-British, anti-colonial, pro-labor, and he's Roosevelt's insurance policy because as long as he's vice president, the British can't kill Roosevelt because they get somebody they hate even more. And the way that Wallace was eased off the ticket is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yes, indeed. Roald Dahl, here he is. The British spy ring in Washington, including operations in the house on R Street. Get Wallace off the ticket so the assassination of Roosevelt can proceed. And replace him, of course, with Ku Klux Klan Representative Harry Truman. Mastermind of these things, Sir William Stevenson, intrepid, the head of the British Security Coordination set up in Rockefeller Center after 1940. Now, the suspicions in the Roosevelt case focus on the Russian woman artist who was with FDR at the time of his death. She was present with her Russian assistant, a photographer, when the president was stricken with a cerebral hemorrhage in April 1945. Only 63 years old. She's rumored to have been implicated. She had a paint box. And Nobody ever looked at her paint box. What was in the paint box? Blue, red, green, arsenic, strychnine, cyanide? I don't know, but that's the idea. And that's one of her paintings. That's a painting of Roosevelt by Mrs. Shumatov when she met him the first time in July 1943. And there's the one from April 1945 when he looks much worse. And then, of course, his funeral. Remember, Stalin told Elliot Roosevelt, 1946, the Churchill gang poisoned your father. This cannot be simply ignored. And, interestingly enough, one of the cousins of this charming lady, the conductor, Igor Markevich, is accused now in Italy, in the Moro assassination, of being the strategic boss of the Red Brigades and ordering or even carrying out the assassination of Moro, who had been clashing, of course, with Kissinger. Now, we're getting to the end. There's a book about the other 19. I'll give you a couple of 19s. Go to the person, Colonel Marr, who commanded the air defense, and ask him, why didn't you scramble all your planes and put an umbrella over Washington, first of all, and then other aspects, right? Griffiths Air Force Base, Rome, New York. Why not start with that? That's the chain of command. Don't tell me about Cheney and the young man and all this stuff. This is the person who's ordering the planes, and he sends them out over the Atlantic. And then, of course, Dave Frasca, he tells Harry Sammet of the FBI, you will not open a criminal case against Zacharias Moussaoui. And Sammet calls this criminal negligence. And he's apparently still in the FBI headquarters, right? Promoted. How about, huh?
He got promoted.
Promoted. How about that for a couple of 19s, right? Cheney, I think this is not to the point. Now, why has the progress been less than you'd like, right? That was the lament of many. Well, let's look at Cass Sunstein and Mrs. Cass Sunstein. This is Samantha Power. This is now the resident warmonger who speaks for you at the United Nations. And they are the practitioners of cognitive infiltration using limited hangouts by the so-called whistleblowers. Now, I've developed, in my typical way, 5 signs of the limited hangout. The first is, you know what it's like when they don't want to give you publicity, right? You don't get on the cover of Time magazine, right? None of us has, right? Not yet. The leaker, instead, if you're part of a limited hangout, the leaker becomes an immediate media darling. Secondly, there are other leakers in the field who are much more radical. They get ignored because their stuff has not been vetted. The leaker tells the public nothing new except a few details to get credibility. Sorry. The leaker tells nothing, above all, about the main covert operations of the age. Nothing about the Kennedy assassination, nothing about 9/11, nothing about the Arab Spring. And the leaker lays the basis for new covert operations. Clearly, Ellsberg leads to Watergate, Assange leads to the Arab Spring, and Snowden leads to Russophobia. Let's just go through. Ellsberg, this is a CIA limited hangout. And I've written this up. You can find it on tarpley.net. So the goal of this is to demonize the US Army, to whitewash the CIA, and to cover up the Kennedy assassination. And it's all carefully selected, carefully sanitized. And it's also designed to keep you subservient to this kind of person, to a left liberal. In other words, it wants to say, you should see him as your hero. As Mort Saul said at the time, pity the poor leftists, they have so few heroes. When somebody comes along, they give their heart away so easily. Assange, right? Growing up in a flesh pile of drugs under MK Ultra in Australia, this is a limited hangout in the sense that he puts forward a series of carefully selected things. Who suffers as a result of his revelations? Any US, British, Israeli politicians have their careers destroyed? Not a one. Who got hit? Gaddafi, Mubarak, Putin, Berlusconi, Karzai, Maliki, Kirchner of Argentina, and so forth. In other words, the people targeted was the CIA hit list. That's who got slammed. And of course, he's got an immediate media consortium, right? In the case of Ellsberg, he's got the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and in his case, he's got the pre-constituted international group of, the New York Times, the Spiegel, and a bunch of other newspapers around the world. Now, how about Snowden? I'm glad to hear from Wayne Madsen, and I'm glad to hear from John Young, that Snowden has revealed nothing new, except a couple of code names, right? Prism, Tempora, and X keystroke, I think it's called. But otherwise, we knew this. We knew this starting with the hearings in the European Union about Echelon, right, back 10, 12, 13 years ago. Bradley Manning, I think, is the case of a person who was victimized. He was betrayed by the Assange network. How is it that he was revealed by this guy, Lamo? Lamo seems to be pretty close to Assange. In this case, though, look what he accomplished. He blew up U.S.-Russian relations. And what we're seeing now this past week is that the U.S.-Russian relations are the only way to prevent the big war from breaking out in the Middle East. And he was instrumental in blowing this up. If you read Putin's interview with the Associated Press, Putin says, he called us from China. He said he wanted to come to Russia and we would fight together against the NSA. And Putin said, no. Stay where you are. Don't come here. I don't want you. Russia is not an NGO. We have our own policy. We have our own interests. We're not interested in you. Help. That's what I was afraid of. We just have a couple of more now.
It's a right-wing conspiracy.
Right wing, I don't know, but no, it's something off the keyboard. I'm so sorry.
This went out too.
It looks like that was the straw that broke the camel's back, huh? Up to now, they were able to take it, but then they can't take it. Just bear with me, please.
Are your slides on your website? Are these on your website, the slides?
Tell you what, if you want my slideshow, a nominal fee for handling, call it $10. Get in touch with me on the internet, and I'll be glad to let you have them. It was something up here.
Was it?
That did it. Yeah, it's got.
There it goes.
Okay. Thank you.